My name is Rick Hunt. We're going to take a sneak peek at the World Extreme Skiing Championships in Swift.Silent.Deep movie. When I first saw the film, I was pretty excited to see all my footage on the big screen, I must admit. The storyline is really accurate, and it just really envelopes everything that was going on in the 80s and 90s with regard to skiing in Jackson and the Alaska footage and the whole ball of wax up there.
AK became Mecca. The extended Air Force family migrated north to expand upon what they had started in Granite, and immediately began to pioneer runs in the newfound promised land.
The Extreme Skiing Championships were just starting to happen in North America, and we looked at it as a huge event and a huge opportunity for Jackson to showcase its skiers, and I was psyched when Doug and John wanted to go up there and show their talent, and they proved themselves. They proved that Jackson bred the best skiers. And
Coombs obviously stood out. He skied so solid. He did the gnarliest lines.
Amazing about Doug Coombs is he makes the most difficult skiing look practically easy.
We certainly hadn't experienced any mountains like the Alaska mountains. I mean, we toyed around with the Tetons a little bit, out of bounds at Jackson, but we hadn't been in the big mountains like the Alaskan mountains. And as far as I can tell, none of the California guys or the Utah guys had either.
Phenomenal skiers from all over the place came out of the woodwork. That was what blew me away about Alaska, was people were coming up from Crested Butte, from Squaw, from Jackson and Bridger, and all over the place. And you saw this level of skiing that existed in these places that you might not see here unless you were out with them. In Alaska, they all had this sort of larger playground.
Well, John has a downhill racing background, or he had back then, He just came out of high school, did downhill racing for a while. And so when he entered the contest, he had something to prove. And, him and Doug were good friends, but he really had that fire in his belly to beat Doug. And his turns were 20, 30 miles an hour faster than everybody else. And it just blew everybody's mind, including mine. I mean, I'd seen him ski fast before, but I was just like amazed at the speed he was carrying. And the conditions were tough. We were on narrow skis and 210 skis, and he was just letting them rip, and there's just no way that anybody else could do that with those old tools, It wasn't, it was beyond comprehension back then, what he was doing.
He was the first one to really bring this high speed, this backcountry downhill style, not only to like the aprons, like the 35 and 40 degree runouts, but he was doing that in the gnar, like in the really steep, 50 plus lines. Nobody'd ever seen anything like that.
I had just purchased my Airy, and that was the first time for me to ever film with a film camera. And so when we went up on Dimond, that was my first or second day shooting ever in my whole life. And so the footage is all shaky, and it's kind of looks like home movies and whatever, but I was learning as we went. And I think we loaded a couple rolls backwards, so the emulsion side was reversed, and that's why it's all looks like we're skiing on Mars on a couple of those rolls. And that was the backside of Dimond that doesn't typically get skied anymore because it usually doesn't hold snow, but for some reason that year it was holding snow, and Zell lost his ski on the backside there, and I remember just traipsing around there, before we were really avalanche savvy too. I mean, we pushed it, and fortunately no one got hurt.
We were doing like 10, 15 runs a day, just going here, oh, look at that. We ski that? It's like, well, nobody has yet. Well, let's ski it.
Looking back, it was like, I'm not sure. I think the pilots were experimenting on us to see how brave we were. I don't know.
The first Dimond trip was a story in itself. I was skiing around with Jimmy and filming Jimmy Zell, and John and Doug were in a different ship. And I wanted to hook up with my brother because I'd filmed Jimmy for a couple runs, and I wanted to go film John and Doug. So I get in a ship with those guys, and we take off from the Tsiana Lodge, And we're flying up, and Dimond is right there in the backyard. And John and Doug were pointing at Dimond going, is there an LZ up there? And Chet was like, I don't know, nobody's ever skied it, but Scott Schmidt wanted me to save it for him. And John and Doug were like, let's go check it out, And so we went up there and flew up there, and sure enough, on the shoulder, there was an LZ that Chet felt comfortable with. And we flew up there, and we landed, and we get out, and I'm just like, I'm shaking. But, I'm following John and Doug, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to hang with you guys, and hopefully everything works out. Well, anyway, John and Doug Rochambeau'd for first tracks, and that's why that run, they call it the shoulder run now, I think, or something, but they called it Rochambeau back then. John won the Rochambeau. They post-holed up to get the correct fall line, and John ripped it down there, first tracks ever on Diamond Peak. Then the next day, we went back up with a big plan to hit all the different aspects, because the powder was holding on all different aspects. It was just, John says to this day that, there's very few days that match that day. And we went up to the summit, and I dropped off the cornice, skied down, 2 or 3 turns to get in the camera position, and then all hell broke loose. John went one way, Zell went another way, Doug went another way, and it was just magical. My favorite part of the film was probably the opening segment with the deep powder, the shots of Doug skiing the chest deep blower in Red Mountain. I like the powder shots, I think.
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm.
This is Rick Hunt. Enjoy the early days of skiing in Jackson and Valdez, and I hope Swift.Silent.Deep treats you right.